where he's holding his finger like this. Some people, some of my teachers have mentioned how he's indicating the First Noble Truth. And that is the consensus most of the time. But I was informed of a certain great teacher of the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Chah or Luangpur Cha, who passed away some years ago, turning to his students and mentioning how what this gesture of the Buddha meant was, all it takes is just this much, which I thought it was just so lovely. All it takes is just this much. Now, this much of what? This much of my teaching is sufficient to encapsulate everything. As they say in the tradition, 84,000 teachings that the Buddha has given for 45 years. And the this much part is the Buddha's words. In Pali it's Sabbe Dhamma Nalam Abhinivesaya. What that means is nothing is fit to be clung to. Now, you find this saying of the Buddha as he's explaining the practice to Venerable Mahamoggallana before he became an arahant. He was struggling with his meditation. He was plagued by the 5 hindrances, specifically the drowsiness. He was really struggling to sit through the night. He was really struggling also with restlessness. And the Buddha appears to him in the flesh, and while he was sitting in the cave, Venerable Mahamoggallana, and says, Moggallana, when you are attacked by drowsiness, I want you to do these things. So it's wonderful how he goes, it's so pragmatic, his approach. At one point he says, just get up from your seat and walk around. Back and forth, when you're really feeling so sluggish, so sleepy in your practice, that your mindfulness is shaken, your awareness is not there. At another time he says, but if that's not enough, go ahead and splash your face with some water. He actually says that. I remember my teachers used to say that. If I got drowsy in class, just go wash your face, come back. And a whole slew of other things. And then he finally says, but if your drowsiness is so bad that you're still feeling sleepy, just go ahead and lay down on your right side. Make sure you're interlocked, have one leg over the other. And with mindfulness, just allow what is to be happening to happen. And then when you wake up, however, wake up with mindfulness with yourself, just opening your eyelashes. But one of the things he also adds is when Venerable Mahamoggallana turns to him and says, Bhante, is there a way, what's the shortest, briefest explanation that you could give me that by practicing it, I would be able to completely be free of all the taints, all the fetters, and become an arahant, fully liberated? And he says, pay attention, I will tell you. And he says, Moggallana, nothing is fit to be clung to, attached to. And when I was reading this some time ago, I was just blown away at it's so full of meaning, it's so short, it's so powerful, and you could take it with you, it's so portable. You could take it anywhere. And it's just, it takes you into the practice, and all the years of studying this and that, decades of it, could be put into this one single short sentence. Okay, how does that translate into our own lives? I mean, yes, I understand. Fine, we're not going to cling to this. Or a relationship usually comes to mind. Something that was taken away from us, like health. Earlier we were talking about how our height is so susceptible to impermanence. Well, not just our height, everything else is. Everything else is. Our health. We've talked about this in regards to standing in front of the mirror and checking ourselves and seeing, oh, that wrinkle wasn't there. And at times some of us can be playful with it and start giving them names, the wrinkles. I used to do it one time in the past. And okay, loved ones leaving us. In fact, no one's leaving, it's just the process. The reality of things. All conditioned things are impermanent. There's another Pali word for that, a phrase for that, sabbe sankhara anicchati. All conditioned things, all things that are come to be, are structured together, formulated, put together, which basically means everything, are impermanent. Now, we kind of know this already intellectually, cognitively, so it's like, okay, give me something I don't know. Attitude usually resides there when we hear things like this. Very similar to the suffering bit, that people say, yeah, I know that. What's so special about Buddhism? I know suffering. Not exactly. Cognitively understanding something is one thing. Viscerally experiencing it, where it becomes a response that every cell in your body registers to all the data that's coming in. This loved one who used to hold so tenderly is now in a casket in front of you, a few feet away. Or the dark hair or the blonde hair you had that had no speck of gray hair, now it's full of it, if it's still there to begin with. And some of us, that is actually, that's powerful. And there's nothing wrong with experiencing it as a powerful phenomenon. Because we have the tendency to cling. In order for us to exist as human beings, or any type of a being, we need to have about 4 types of clingings, plural. In Pali, they're called upadana. One of them is to an identity of, or actually clinging on to the identity of a self. This is me, this is who I am, this is how I think. Don't try to change me. These are my beliefs, these are my principles, and if you cross me, I'm going to actually protect all of those things, because they are me. That's clinging. We cannot attain awakening if we're still holding on to these things. Now the other clinging type is clinging to views. Dittupadana. Ditta is basically a wrong view, not understanding life, not understanding the purpose of life, what it is that we're suffering for. It's the craving, holding on to things. Don't go. That person was struggling with cancer or something. Don't go. I know I was doing that with my mother. Every time she would come out of chemo, she would be in a deplorable state. She would shrink. This blonde, beautiful, blue-eyed woman that I knew with incredibly brilliant skin, shrinking in front of my eyes. And I would do everything in my power that I knew would kind of counteract that, to hold on. But I was going against nature because I didn't have the proper understanding, the right view. The other thing is clinging to rites and rituals, or traditions, or our own habits. our own quirks, even our own idea of this is my society, I'm a human being, this is my race of people, this is my ethnic background, this is my nationality, this is my culture. It's another form of identification. And the fourth one is clinging to sensual objects, things that we think are going to give us happiness. Now, so many teachers, one of them, one of my teachers actually, he passed away this summer, Venerable Punnaji. He used to say, people are confused. They don't know the difference between happiness and pleasure, seeking pleasure. They equate both as the one thing. It's not the same thing. Our lives have basically turned into maximizing the opportunities for us to gain more pleasure and the minimizing of those situations where we feel a lack of pleasure, meaning painful experiences, when we're not getting what we want, or when we are being stuck with something that we don't want. They're equally painful. So we want to minimize those while we maximize those opportunities where we're feeling, yeah, my object of pleasure has been attained. And then what? All of a sudden, we're addicted to that pattern, to that cycle, which is now clearly and abundantly obvious in the world of social media. There are two things that is taking place right now. There is addiction and there is manipulation through the digital media. Manipulation, every time you go on Google, for example, you hit a search, it's a search engine, you just look for something, anything. And if you're on social media as well, the very next moment when you go to check out something or just to check out your feed, all of a sudden there is something pertinent to your whatever you searched for 5 seconds earlier. Now the algorithms have been written in order for them to not miss out those moments. And guess what? Our brains are responding to them. In fact, they are specifically and systematically designed to give us those moments of pleasure. And that's exactly what an addict goes through. See, an addict does not just follow those moments of peak experience of like a gambler, for example, hitting that slot machine and all of a sudden getting some money out. They're not just addicted to that. They're addicted to the whole cycle, to the whole process of them feeling down when they putting there the coin and then pulling that thing, the lever, and then nothing comes out. And the excitement is, filling up. It's adding more, intensifying. And that's what my teacher, Bhante Punnaji, used to say, that's tension. The tension is building up, and that's the same thing that Freud used to say about, happiness. He didn't know much about Buddhism, but he would talk about pleasure and happiness as the same thing. But he would say, your seeking after pleasure is none other than trying to get that tension to be released. He would refer that about the sexual act, for example, often. That's Freud, I mean, come on. But that's big. When we look at our quest for happiness in those terms, we start seeing why we're so attached to experiences, individuals in our lives perhaps, that we want to latch on to, because we are equating those moments to true happiness. And the whole mission of the Buddha was to indicate to us that no, it's not. Because the same body that gave you all those beautiful pleasures, let's say, one day you're going to look at it and you're going to see that it is incapable of doing those things, or present the opportunities for it to experience those things. And now what happens is those three defilements show up. Lusting after things, greedy after things, anger that you are now no longer able to get X, Y, and Z, and then the delusion of completely ignoring what's taking place. I mean, in the meantime, you've never learned your lesson. And guess what? In a nutshell, that's why we keep coming back according to the teachings. We keep coming back because we're always thirsting for that moment of, I want to get that high, I want to get that experience of pleasure, I want to get that happiness. And that's why the Buddha said, pointing back to his meditators, we are the happy ones. He didn't say, we are those who seek pleasure, because if there's pleasure, there's pain. I had one teacher in the past who used to say, pleasure and pain are the two sides of the same coin. When I first heard this, I was like, really? That was a different paradigm. I had to spend a few years pondering that. And then my body helped. It's a great teacher, right? So, if I look at social media, and it doesn't have to be, every one of us is somewhat connected to it, the World Wide Web, right? We're in the system in one way or the other. This morning I woke up with the thought that, oh my, the whole premise of social media is to simply nullify, to negate the three declarations of the Buddha. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Impermanence, suffering, and non-substantiality. Because what I mean by that is that it constantly is feeding us with sensations that kind of mask those declarations that the Buddha made. It's like the secret code that the Buddha gave to us about, it's like open source code, right? Current lingo. Impermanence, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, dukkha, and non-substantiality. So today's digital information age, in the form of the social media that we're all linked up to, or to, is trying to take away the sense of, no, there is no impermanence. What are you talking about? You can see these ads that people are promoting this and that. Oh, you want happiness? Go to this retreat. Go and become a yoga instructor here, somewhere in Bali or something. Oh, go to Italy. Go to this place. Go there. Or see what this person is doing. If you go and do that, and you'll earn all this money, you'll buy this house, you'll buy this Maserati. No. Collections of Maserati. You're going to be really happy. So it's pushing us, yes, away from interacting with other human beings, but mostly it's also pushing us away from really experiencing our own bodies, our own living experience. That's why we're so caught in this thing. And we do get dopamine hits every single time we look at them. We look at, did I get a message? Did I get an email? Did I get a response? Heck, I never send anything to get a response to, but I'll check. Maybe somebody sent me something. Oops, see? Siri just showed up. So it's like, really? And the suffering part is also being muffled, muted. Until we take a sneak peek outside of our window and see that there is death, there is suffering in life. And every time we do see an uncomfortable sight somewhere, we just want to go ahead and patch it up. Okay, here's my credit card. Okay, let me send you donations. Okay, Doctors Without Borders. Okay, here's $100. Go, fix that, please. Because it's uncomfortable. I don't want to feel the dukkha. I don't want to feel the suffering. And there's entire traditions showing up out of the woodworks, including in Buddhism, or at least secular Buddhism, who are promising people things that go completely 180 degrees to what the Buddha taught. Promoting of sensuality, promoting of this, under the guise of mindfulness often. What have we come to? You know, some people have said, oh, you're too much of a purist. Really? I'm not making anything up. I'm just going back to the suttas. That's what I'm presenting. Here you go. See it for yourself. Sit down, practice what this is saying. See it for yourself. Ehipassiko. Come test it out yourself. Don't take anything I'm saying, any of the teachers have said, including the Buddha, for granted. Don't ever believe any of it. There's none of that in there, in the tradition. Test it out yourself. I mean, isn't that what we do when we get a video game? We want to test it out. By the way, I never play a video game. The last time I played video games were Ataris in the 80s. You know, beep, beep, you know, the ping pong. I was trying to explain that to one of my clients last week. And it's another thing, you know, as a therapist, it's quite an astonishingly disturbing phenomenon, this video game industry that's separating families, creating so much cognitive distortion in these children that are now refusing to interact with actual other kids of their own age in person, face to face, without what's a console, right? Like a joystick or whatever. They don't have that anymore, but it's like they don't want to look at each other's eyes. Their medium of communication is the screen. They're lacking so much social skills. They're lacking, in fact, empathy. They're lacking respect, obviously. That's, forget it. And parents are giving in, yeah, I just don't want him, because they come home, the parents, so tired, drained, and, oh, Mom, I want to play 2, 3, 4 hours more, on top of the 2 hours that was my allowance for that day, after I've done my homework. Sure, go. Leave me alone. Well, you're going to pay for that. You as a parent and we as a society are paying for that. And I'm in the front line as a therapist. I used to be in the front line as a teacher. But now it's gotten worse. You know, yeah, they have psychologists, they have actual experts on the brain working with these companies in Silicon Valley, with Google, with Facebook, with obviously all these companies, you know, that are making so much money. And kids are even stealing their own parents' credit cards to go ahead and buy some credit for games like Fortnite or whatever. I don't know what these games are, but based on what I'm hearing from my clients, my patients, I'm like, really? That, just hearing it, I feel like 15 or 17 of my brain cells just died. That's a huge loss for me. It's sad. There's so much of our energy that's being invested in the past, so much of our energy that's invested in the future, and life is passing us by. People have asked me, what are you saying? Like, basically I shouldn't have goals, or I shouldn't have plans? No. Of course, you know, we need to have an idea. I had an idea. I knew what I was going to, where I was going to come to today, at what time to be here. So that's a plan. We need to plan out, like tomorrow, some of us are going to be working this and that, what you have projects set up for yourselves and things like that. So that's necessary. or you booked yourself a flight, you know where to go to actually get on that plane to go to where. We're not talking about those conventionalities. What we're talking about is completely being subsumed, completely being enmeshed in this drive that society is being like funneled into, where there is no room for the individual to practice their critical thinking. And that's where freedom of choice comes in. Many of us think that we do have freedom of choice, and that's just hogwash. It's nonsense. Unless we actually are aware that many of the times that I am making a choice, it's going against the grain, you know. I am truly going against the stream at this point. I'm aware that what society is going to think of me making this move is not going to go well. Society wants me to go and watch this movie that's just coming out. Why? Is it beneficial? Is it helpful? Do I really want it? Okay. But how much of that is being influenced by outside factors? Now, we're always exposed to outside factors, and that's why I mentioned to students in meditation, meditation is an outside-in affair. You're actually stopping the leakage of being drained. Remember what I said earlier about we're invested in our past or invested in the future but not living here? Investment of what? Our what is being invested? Our energies, our time, the thinking process. How much of your energy is being dedicated to the living experience? How much of you is really relinquishing the attachment you have towards the outcomes of whatever it is that I'm involved in? And that's where the first phrase that I mentioned in the talk comes in. Mahamoggallana, nothing is fit to be clung to. Nothing is fit to be clung to. We all have all kinds of stuff that we're very much clinging to. Friendships, love, ideas of I don't know what I'm going to bring into society, the contributions I'm making or will be making. And then all of the islands to these things, all of the tiny little other conditions that show up, and then the others, and then the others, and then all of a sudden we look at all of this and we see that we're not living. See, to be able to not cling to anything, you can only cling to things that are in the past, by the way, or in the future. The Buddha said, the past is dead and gone, and the future is not there anyhow, yet. But social media or any culture at any time has always directed a human being towards holding on to things that are in the past or in the future. Read any poetry book, you'll see that. Read any newspaper, you'll see that. Any piece of literature. Any art. I mean, in this, a few months ago, there was a 2 months absence, by the way, but I was here, I was ready, but there were visiting monks and things. I thought it would be great for them to give talks, but I was in Italy this summer for a few weeks. And it was just mind-blowingly beautiful as far as, like, because I have a background in art. Just standing there, I was like, oh, one after another, one after another, one after another. But even as a giant, incomparable giant as Michelangelo, when he carved in his early 20s the statue of David, for example, I mean, it's just, there's no words to describe it. But How much of that was leaning into the past as well as leaning into the future? And that's where we are. We're always leaning into something that is not here. Usually we're leaning into fears that we have, expectations of others from ourselves that we have now made it our own. We've kind of used those oily, very annoying razors, just like, razors just to kind of wipe off the name of the person who gave us that, whether it was a teacher or a parent. But we've made it our own. We've written our names instead. And that's where we carry our own stigmas, our own fears, our own expectations, and our own hang-ups. And that's why there's this tremendous lack of forgiveness towards ourselves. Many of the students come to me saying, we cannot move forward, or I'm not able to go beyond this hurdle that I constantly come at, and it's like obstructing my path to go deeper. And the key, the answer to every single time is forgiveness. It's you're forgiving yourself, and in many cases you're forgiving also. I don't want to go on a tangent here, but when you're having issues with an individual, sometimes people say, well, I don't want to forgive them because they've done this, and in fact, they're still doing it to somebody else. How can I forgive them? You're not forgiving them. You're forgiving yourself. You're cutting the cord, basically. I am cutting the cord from my end. Thank you very much. What you do with that, that's your problem. I'm done. There's no more linkage between us. And as we are holding on to the fears, memories, or the trauma of the past, and you don't have to have had a major trauma in your life, they could be mini traumas, micro traumas. As long as we're holding on to those, or even lovely memories. How come that doesn't happen to me again? I want that to happen to me again. That's still holding on, because you're not seeing what's in front of you. See, I was describing this this funny story that I heard years ago. There was this person who had donkeys. He had a herd of, I guess you can call them herd, of donkeys. So he knew he had 100 of them. And every day he would count. One day he's sitting on one of his donkeys and he's counting them. And every single time it comes out to be 99. 99, and he's really like pulling his hair out, this and that, and his neighbors, fellow villagers, come by and it's like, why are you so upset? We can hear you from the village that you're screaming, like, what's up, what's going on? It's like, somebody stole my donkey. Yesterday there were 100 of them, I counted them in the stable, now there's 99. And they start, okay, somebody did steal them, I guess. So, but they say, first, can we, before we point fingers, look around for the thief, can we look at your donkeys and count them? And he's like, sure. And they all count. It comes out to be 100. And they turn to him with a funny look and they say, did you count the one you're sitting on? Our donkey is this moment. This moment. And then, because what's happening is we're always holding on, leaning into the future and saying, I have to stop the aging process. I have to stop you from going away. I have to stop this memory, this excited moment to disappear. Years ago, I used to, when I first got introduced to opera through my dad, and I used to listen to, for example, Pavarotti, for example, he would sing and he would get to those high notes and it's just like mind-blowingly beautiful, this aria, this and that. And I would, like, something in me would say, no, still stay there, don't go, stop. And that moment is gone. And I would try to recapture that by replaying it and messing up the tape or the CD. But then I thought, like, wait a minute, is that fair? there was a sadness there in me. And this was years ago. And then I said to myself, okay, what am I doing? I'm holding on to something that is designed not to last. So basically the composer, whether it's Puccini or somebody else, who wrote this beautiful score, the person, the lyricist and all that, and then the actual performer, they're all experiencing that high. They've perfected their skills, their art, to get it to that point so it becomes alive for that moment, and then it disappears. I said, oh my, they also felt impermanence, suffering, and non-substantiality, because ultimately there is no aria, there is no score, there is no singer, because now Pavarotti is dead. All you can have is basically a CD of his, or a DVD, or just MP3 or whatever. So even that pleasure we can use as a conduit, as an avenue of approach to come back to an understanding of impermanence, suffering, and non-substantiality. See, this talk should not give us the idea that we need to shun pleasure. No, 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 there's no such thing in this. There's no intention of such in this talk. But we need to understand our own attachment. Even having an attachment, there is such a thing as having an attachment to Nibbana, having an attachment to the teachings. You see, Venerable Sariputta, you had two chief disciples to the Buddha. You had Mahamoggallana, and then you had Venerable Sariputta. Two extremely high level, they were second only to the Buddha in their abilities, in their wisdom. That's how powerful these individuals were. And Venerable Sariputta, before he became an arahant, and he was struggling. One day, it was very hot, Indian summers, it's very hot, and the Buddha was sitting there and in the shade, and in the shade it's over 100 degrees, by the way. And Venerable Sariputta was fanning the Buddha as the Buddha was giving a discourse to some people who had approached him asking for instruction. And Venerable Sariputta's mind was so intent on understanding and seeing what was the Buddha, what was he teaching. And as he was fanning, immediately the idea, the understanding came to his mind. Wow! Even the Buddha, my teacher, the person, the chief, the king of the Dhamma himself, is not attached to his teachings. That was an aha moment for him, and he's just like, ah, so I shouldn't be attached to the understanding that I already have. And he was already a Sotapanna, and then a once returner, but he was not an arahant yet. That realization just cracked it open. He pierced through the ignorance that was in his mind. And he saw that even the Dhamma itself could be an attachment that one could have. And then he just, he saw it. And the whole process took over, and he became an arahant. And the Buddha saw it in his mind, and he smiled. He was kind of slow because it only took him 2 weeks to become an arahant. Mahamoggallana, the other chief disciple, became an arahant in 1 week. And he had all these psychic powers, but the reason for him taking so long, as 2 weeks, an extra week, was because he had to understand, he had to have the deep, deep understanding, to the level of the Buddha almost, of the 12 links of causation, Four Noble Truths. Because oftentimes when, especially in the later years of the Buddha's life, the Buddha would get physically tired, or not want to, for whatever reason, give an explanation of a talk that he gave. Or some people would approach to get answers, and the Buddha would not be there, and they would go to Venerable Sariputta because he was the second in command. He was the Grand Marshal of the Dhamma, or the General of the Dhamma. And he would give a perfect Dhamma talk. And later on, the monks would go to check in. See, there was a lot of like checks and balances, if I may use that analogy, in the time of the Buddha, which we don't see today. Today anybody can come up and start talking about the Dhamma as this or that, and there's no accountability. Well, somebody has to hold them accountable, and that's us. And that's why we need to go and study, understand, ask questions. Don't just take it flat out, yeah, that's my teacher. So I know we've hit on several different things today, but we can give one question.
One and two.
One or two, okay. Please. Thank you for listening, first of all. Questions?